As a professor at the University of Oklahoma and the founding director of the Hope Research Center, I'm driven by three primary issues. Trying to understand what is hope and why does it matter. More importantly, my work is focused on how does trauma and adversity rob us of hope. And then more importantly, how do program services, simple program services, nurture and restore that hope? So I'll start with this. Did you know that hope is based upon a robust body of science? More importantly, hope can be taught. We have programs where we're teaching 3-year-olds how to nurture hope all the way across the lifespan. I've spent the last 15 years studying the concept of hope in domestic violence, child maltreatment, homelessness, food insecurity, etc. But this story is also very personal for me. My wife is a domestic violence therapist in Oklahoma and has been doing that work for many years. And as the child of a survivor, this work is also very important to me. One of the strengths of hope is that there's over 2,000 published research studies that demonstrate our capacity to hope is one of the strongest predictors of our capacity to thrive for children, for adults, and for families. But what is hope? So hope is the belief that the future can be different and that we have the power to make it so. So if we think about that definition, hope is the belief that the future can be better, can be robbed. The fact that we have the power to make it so can be robbed of us. But if we think about that definition, hope is the belief that the future will be better than today and that we have the power to make it so. If you stop with the first part of that definition, hope is the belief that the future will be better, that's optimism. Hope goes beyond optimism by this idea that we are empowered to make it so. So in this way, hope is about taking action to pursue that future. Hope is based upon 3 simple concepts: the goals that we desire, and then more importantly, the strategies or the pathways that we have to pursue and attain those goals. Pathways thinking is our ability to identify the roadmaps of how we're going to get there from here. And then finally, this capacity of willpower. Willpower is the motivational piece, the mental energy that we can dedicate towards those pathway pursuits. Again, the experience of distress and trauma can rob us of those 3 things. But what I want us to think about today as we begin to consider the Family Justice Center model as a pathway of hope is the way that we typically use the word in everyday conversation. So such things as, I hope you're well. I hope you have a great day. Now, I'm from Oklahoma, and one of the things that I get the privilege of talking about is that in Oklahoma, we'll say things like, I hope there are no tornadoes today. And that's obviously very common. Now, if we break that down in the concept of hope, my goal is that I don't want there to be severe storms. I have a lot of willpower. I'm dedicating a lot of energy towards that. But do I have any control over the weather? And the answer is, of course I don't. And so what I want us to do is to understand the distinction between hoping and wishing. Because when we have a wish, we have a desire for an outcome, but no pathways, no strategies to achieve it. Wishing is passive towards the future. Hope is about taking action. Earlier this year, I was fortunate enough to lead a project and have served as the lead researcher for the Alliance for Hope International with my good friend and colleague Casey Gwynn, Gail Strack. And earlier this year, we published a paper that demonstrated on a longitudinal design that survivors interacting with the Family Justice Center show significant gains in their capacity for hope, that empowerment for the future is greatly enhanced. More importantly, we also saw significant gains in survivor-defined success. That is, the goals that the survivor set and their ability to pursue and attain that. A little bit earlier, you heard about this concept of Camp Hope. Camp Hope is a program for children exposed to domestic violence. I've been very fortunate to evaluate Camp Hope over the last almost 10 years now. And what I can tell you as somebody who evaluates programs for health and human services, both in Oklahoma and across the nation, that is one of my primary jobs, I have never seen a program more powerful on the impact of the well-being of children than this program that you all are about to launch. Camp Hope America, Camp Hope and Foyle Family Justice Centre will change the trajectory of children's lives. And in our publication, what we saw were significant gains in a child's capacity to hope. But what I want you to hear is that hope is not the outcome. Hope is the process. Hope is the process, and the outcome for us is always well-being. It is always the capacity to thrive. And what our research with Camp Hope nationally, 3,000 children across 26 states in the U.S., what we found is that a simple 2-point increase in a child's capacity to hope, which, by the way, is not much at all. You're literally moving the needle on that child's hope. But that 2-point increase in hope predicted a letter grade change in the classroom the following academic year. And as you can imagine, a child going from a failing grade to a passing grade is a game changer in that child's life. That's the power of hope. The Family Justice Center is clearly a pathway of hope. I woke up at 1:30 this morning, local time, wide awake, ready to go, and I started to think about the Family Justice Center and its various partners that are all going to be co-located. And I began to reflect on all the training that I've been doing with judges and others. And one of the things that kept occurring to me is that individually, and I love the conversation of together, but individually, if we think about those organizations, they have a goal, such as to complete an investigation for the proper decision-making process, a medical examination, or social services. They all have individually their goal. But for survivors, each of those individual program services working together is the pathway of hope for a better future. And so we need to begin to think about the community, the multidisciplinary agencies that are involved in a Family Justice Center are all pathways, and to not necessarily think about the goal of your work in that moment, but that what you're doing is a pathway to the future of well-being for that survivor and their children. So one of the things that has happened in the United States over the last couple of years is this concept of hope has exploded. And so we've become really interested in the idea, knowing that if our capacity for hope is such a strong predictor of reduced depression, reduced anxiety, improved educational outcomes, improved workplace outcomes, that if there's a power in our capacity to hope, what would the power of collective hope look like in a community or in an organization? So in Oklahoma, where I'm from, our governor, Kevin Stitt, has declared that Oklahoma will become the first hope-centered state in the nation. We are now training all 112 state agencies on the science of hope. I have until next year, this time next year, to train 35,000 state employees on the concept of hope, creating hope-centered services. So for me, hope is a framework that guides actions. Now remember, hope is not the outcome. Well-being is always the outcome. So creating hope-centered systems allow not only the customers, the clients, the survivors to thrive, but also the employees. the staff to do that. We've recently published research that demonstrates that when we engage in this HOPE training, that what we see are significant reductions in burnout, significant reductions in secondary traumatic stress, and significant improvements in retention. In particular, the director of Oklahoma Department of Human Services, our largest state agency, 6,000 employees, saw a statistically significant increase in HOPE in the child welfare division and a 33% reduction in turnover, saving countless millions of dollars for taxpayers. Following close behind that is now Mississippi, Washington, California, and New York. In Mississippi, I've now trained every single family court judge and the family court team on the science of HOPE. How do we create HOPE-centered courtrooms that meet the needs of children, of survivors, and families? In the state of Washington, a couple of weeks ago, I trained 651 judges, including the appellate court judges and the Supreme Court justices. They are also moving towards creating a HOPE-centered system. And one of the things, Mary, that I will tell you that I'm excited about, it popped into my mind as I was listening to these wonderful stories, is that what if we created a training mechanism for people with lived experience who can help create HOPE-centered systems to serve and to volunteer with women and children who are coming through the services, and recognizing and prepare them when hope is going to be robbed and how to get through that. The power of that, I think, is unlimited. California, we trained every single probation officer in the state of California, which is huge, along with 22 school districts. I'll come to a near conclusion by this. The power of hope is in the evidence, in what we're finding consistently in the data, and its ability to predict well-being and outcomes. At the federal level, our Department of Justice just released a $2.5 million grant focused on creating hope-centered law enforcement communities, protecting America's law enforcement who are on the front lines day in and day out. And so the idea is, how do we protect burnout and exposure to secondary traumatic stress among first responders who are doing this work? So this idea that hope, and that hope is about taking action, it's the belief that the future can be better than today and that you have the power to make it so. That is the essence of hope. At the Hope Research Center at the University of Oklahoma, I am honored and privileged to partner with the Foyle Family Justice Centre and Women's AIDS. We've been having conversations over the past year, but next week we'll actually begin training the support staff on this concept of hope to truly move it towards a hope-centered organization. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you briefly about the concept of hope and the power that it has. And one of the things that I specifically wanted to highlight is two things. One is that hope can be taught, it can be nurtured, it is not wishful thinking, and more importantly, the Family Justice Center via our peer-reviewed publications is clearly a pathway of hope for survivors and families. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.